Welcome to another episode of High Output AI, where Elliot and Tom discuss all the tools and techniques that make AI happen. Hello. Welcome to episode 37 of High Output AI. Elliot, how are you, mate?
I'm doing pretty darn well. How are you, Tom?
I'm wonderful. I've gone for the healthy option today. Instead of a beer, I've got a matcha tea.
Ooh, matcha tea. I'm getting like a million ads on YouTube for this yerba mate stuff. Do you get those ads too? I don't even know what it is. It's some sort of tea thing.
It's the like South American drink, right?
Looks like it. I don't know. I just have water because I got to go for a run after this and did not feel like doing that with a beer.
Yeah. Look at us. Well, shall we jump into it, mate, after we've welcomed all our new subscribers and talked a little bit about the new episode format we're going to give a go today?
Yeah, 100%. As Tom said, welcome to everybody who's new to the show. Hope you're enjoying it here. If you found this because you were searching for a hot topic and our new format is paying off, then let us know by subscribing and liking and leaving comments and all that. But yeah, look, as Tom hinted at, we're trying something slightly different. And this I saw originally from Cal Newport. He used to do just a collection of stuff that came up that week in his Q&A, and then found that by picking a specific topic, making the episode focused around that topic, and keeping it all cohesive, whether it be the dial-ins or articles that he read that week, etc., it was a lot easier for people to share the show when people asked about stuff, and search for episodes of the show without having to remember, was it episode 28 or 32 where they talked about that? So, on that note, we're going to try the same thing. Each episode from now on will still contain relevant news, papers, and deals, but it'll be focused around a theme. And that way, if you are listening to the show and you've got friends that are keen on this topic, you can send along. And if you think, what episode was that where they talked about foundation models, it'll be right there in the title and you'll know where to look. And I may have just given away the topic for today, but that's okay because we're in the midst of it. Today's topic is, are foundation models the future of artificial intelligence?
And I will add that we will be choosing our topics based off both the Q&A and the Discord, so please join that. Come along for the conversation, but also as well what's in the news at the time of recording. And we've had a little bit of a big week here as well, and we'll jump into the news as well with Meta releasing their Segment Anything model and Amazon releasing some news around their AWS service as well, and also their a few of their foundation models. So that's what we're going to jump into this week. And what we're going to kind of talk about is, first off, is what is a foundation model. We're going to run through a few examples, including the news ones that I just mentioned. And then we'll turn our little telescope towards the future and have a look into the future and get some Elliot and Tom hot takes of what we think the foundation models will look like and whether they will continue forward and whether they'll still be a thing.
100% more hot takes in this new format. You can rest assured. So, man, look, diving right in, I think up front, as we've listed, it's probably important that we talk about what the hell a foundation model even is.
Yep.
I don't think there's a set definition. I see a lot of stuff being thrown around, but I think before we get into the specifics, it's about models that underpin other models.
Yep.
It's the same way that your operating system is the foundation of your computing environment. These models are meant to be underneath everything else, and then you build on top of them.
Yeah, and I see these models as almost direct link with the original data. That's how I consider them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, number one aspect of a foundation model in my mind is that it's trained.
Yeah.
It's not an open source repository of code that you can go and train yourself. It has been trained on a large, for its class, data set. I'd say that is point number one. Number two, I would say, and these are my opinion, but I think they work enough for this discussion, is you need to be able to build on top of it. And I think this is where the first little bit of contention comes in across the industry, is that, to me, For it to be a foundation model, you need to be able to hack on top of it. And I'm not sure, and we'll talk about this a bit later in the show, whether having an API to call your model and get the results counts as being able to hack on top of it.
Can you dig into that a little bit more for me? As why do you see that the openness of the model is important?
So I'm okay with models having APIs, don't get me wrong, but I think if you're going to call yourself a foundation model and paint this picture of this will underpin everything going forward in the space of AI, you need to be able to hack on it. And you can build products on top of APIs, no doubt, but to build new models, so as a foundational model from which other models will come forward, it needs to be more open than just having an API. So we need the data, we need the weights, and we need the code itself, in my mind, to be a true foundation AI model. Now, you could have a foundation AI API if you want to talk that way, but I think some of these companies are positioning things as foundational, as sort of a jumping on the bandwagon of open source community spirit without really being all that open and accessible.
So sorry I interrupted you there, but you had your first 2 points, which is a trained model. The second one is that you can hack on top of it. What are your other characteristics of a foundation model?
So I think it needs to be very broadly applicable. I think, we look at large language models, we look at the segment anything, we look at image generation models. They're not industry specific. They're very broad base. They can be used in a number of different use cases and importantly refined down after they've been trained. We'll probably see, let's call these models layer 1. We'll probably see a bunch of layer 2 models, which are the medical application, the automated driving application, the image editing applications on top of these models. I don't think those are necessarily foundation models. The foundation models, to me, are trained on as broad a corpus as possible to give them wide applicability, even if they're not great at a very specific task.
I think we disagree on this point a little bit, but I won't steal our thunder from a robust discussion coming in the future of the foundation models. But so, you've got your 3 characteristics there, which is kind of industry / vertical agnostic. As your third, any more characteristics that you, or like even those seem to be pretty inclusive, those 3. Are there any other kind of characteristics that you would look for before you classified something as foundation?
No, I'd say given where we are at the minute, like that's probably as specific as I would want to go. I think, we can use this now as a way to take some examples and rule things in and out. So if we look at some of the GPT-4, for example, massive model, it ticks the box of it's trained, it ticks the box that it's broadly applicable, but given that you can't get access to all the underlying code and the weights, probably doesn't tick that box. It has an API, so it's something else, something we don't yet have a word for, but I think
it's just an influential, important model, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is going to differ a lot depending on who you are. If you're a dev, foundation is going to mean being able to hack on top of it. If you're product, using this within the scope of an application rather than building more AI, maybe foundation means something different to you. But I think for the purposes of this, GPT-4 is certainly foundational, but not quite in the same way that I think some of these other models, let's say Stable Diffusion, which released its code and its weights were, you saw how many things spawned out of that little seed of Stable Diffusion very, very quickly because of its openness. And that, I think, is the key to me about being foundational.
And if you think back historically as well to, when we were just when this space was reheating, can you think of any from that era as well, foundational models, especially around like what Google's released and DeepMind's released?
I think some back in the day you could get pre-trained sort of YOLO image detectors, which were similar.
That's you only learn
only look once.
Look once.
Yeah, it was meant to be a really fast implementation at object detection.
Yeah.
And I think some of the GAN models probably had trained examples. Going way, way back, if we look at some of the image embeddings, the text embeddings that powered a lot of these early text models, a lot of those were open sourced. And we weren't even talking in terms of foundational models back then, but a lot of models built on those, quite broadly trained text embeddings back in the day.
Well, let's switch gears now to like a very recent example and the news and kind of what really spawned this topic this week, which is Meta releasing the segment anything model. And it ticks it. Now, if we think about the characteristics that you just talked about, where it's trained, ticks that box. It is open. You can hack on top of it. Very true. They released all the code and all the weights. And then the third, I've forgotten which one. Industry agnostic. Yep. And that absolutely ticks the box there as well. It literally says it in the name that it is agnostic to it can do anything. So,
yeah.
You want to give us a little background on Meta's release this week?
For sure. So, SAM, Segment Anything Model, came out this week from the Meta AI team, and it is segmentation. And importantly here, I think, for those less familiar with the world of segmentation, it's not semantic segmentation. And what that means is if you give it a little prompt, which is, hey, where I clicked, can you just grab everything that is in the same object as what I clicked on? It can do that pretty well. It has no idea, though, what you just clicked on. So to give an example here, imagine, as you'll see in the demo, there's a link in the show notes if you want to try this out, a picture of a corgi running through a field of grass. Now, this segment anything model, if you were to click on that corgi, which is the prompt in this case, or draw a box around it, it would do a really good job of isolating all the pixels that belong to that corgi. But what it doesn't do is have any idea what a corgi is. It knows how to find images, find objects in images, group things together that look similar and feel like they belong to the same thing, but it's not necessarily, a dog detector per se.
Yep. And it's fantastic to watch some of these demo videos as well. It's very smart at being able to, if you look at RoboFlow, which was something we'll mention a little bit later on as well, where interacting with segmenting things, you can very quickly click in and click out things. So if you click on the eye, it might do the whole face, but then you say you don't want the chin and stuff, and then you click on the other eye, and it'll very quickly identify that you're looking for the eyes, not the face. But as you said, it doesn't know that it's looking at eyes. It's segmented and masked that piece for you.
Yeah, and look, as a foundational model, and I think this is a good example of why these are important, you could build a semantic version on top of this. One of the things that's addressed in the paper but isn't in the demo just yet is using text as a prompt. So you could
cool.
Potentially find a way to build embeddings that then lead to masks of corgis. And you could type the word corgi in, and it would use that as a prompt. Right now it uses sort of spatial prompts. So you click where you want to segment, or you draw a box around it, and it'll do its best to guess what it is that you're looking at. But yeah, I can see a version of this that takes text pretty soon, and somebody's probably already built it, to be honest.
Yeah, I heard on a podcast I was listening to this week that it was the CEO and founder of RoboFlow saying that, within a month of this podcast coming out, there's going to be someone that's bashed together the models into a single one.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You can think as well using this to augment image generation. Let's say I want a text to image of a corgi running through a field, and it generates it and the background sucks. So you click on the corgi and it segments it out, and you say, keep this bit, but maybe running on the beach. And it redraws the background as a beach, keeping the original corgi in its current form. I can see these models getting glued together. And again, this is why I think foundation models need to be accessible beyond an API, because if you just have simple access to, I can send it an image and a location and it gives me back a mask, or I can do text and it gives me back an image. Sometimes you can glue this stuff together, but I think the nuance gets lost and it gets a little bit harder. Stuff gets lost in translation, let's say.
Yeah, so, and just on our three points about foundation models, if we think about openness, so it's added a cohort of about 11 million images with about 1.1 billion masks, which is a big whack of data, like well labeled data set for this space. It's obviously released all the weights and the code as well. So the second one, the hackable. Have you found? Have you come across any already hacked hacked applications of it so far? I saw a few on Hugging Face as I was looking around, but I can't really recall the specifics of it.
I've seen a few on Twitter. Just pulling them up here. One was using it to do neural radiance fields, which is something we've talked about a little while ago. So segmenting that out and getting a much better 3D generation. I even saw a couple of medical applications where with very little adjustment, it was able to perform sort of organ level segmentation from a CT scan, which is very, very cool. So I think this is sparking this sort of change already. A few people using it for satellite data, for example. I think the fine-tuned version of this model for specific use cases is going to be really, really powerful.
Absolutely. And our third piece was, our third characteristic, which is the industry/vertical agnostic as well. That's obviously ticking the box, says it in the name. But one interesting thing that this points as well to me is, and we'll get into it deeply in the future conversation, is obviously this is segmentation, which is a part of a general broader computer vision problem to some extent. And so how do you consider that with obviously it's industry agnostic, but it's not, I'll say it's quite specific in its application, which is segmenting images. How do you see how do you see that changing with models over time? Are we going to get more and more specific applications?
Yeah, I think different tasks will have their own foundation model. So we have a task here of segmentation. We have a task of text-to-text generation, text-to-image generation, and from the likes of GPT-4, Stable Diffusion. And even in some cases, you could split those in half, which is text to an embedding to text, embedding to image. So I think we're going to see both overarching models like this. This model does make use of architectures from existing places. It uses an image embedding to do a lot of its segmentation. But you can imagine one for audio. You can imagine one for time series data. All sorts of different things will have their own foundation model. I think the requirement is that there's enough data out there to make a good model. 1 billion segmentation masks is a lot. If you were to do this for, I don't know, drug interactions or results on, some bespoke vaccine or something like that, you may not have enough data to broadly train one of these models.
Yeah. But it's a great example of some hot off the press foundation models. So I think we might switch gear now into the Amazon news this week, which is Amazon has announced Bedrock, its ChatGPT and DALL-E rival, as well as some really interesting news. And the way it relates to foundation models is that they've basically come out and said that they will be hosting a variety of new models via AWS. To some extent, you think with the names that they've put up on this list that they will be hosting a few foundation models in the future as well. So, and from their press release here, Bedrock users can perform specific tasks by selecting from a range of machine learning models it calls foundation modules, such as AI21's Jurassic 2, Anthropic's Claude, Stability AI, Stable, and Amazon Titan as well. So a few home brand ones there and a few external ones, but really interesting play by Amazon here.
Yeah, I think it's smart. I love that parallel to Amazon Basics. It's like, Amazon Basics image generation. But I think, especially if you're working in enterprise, if you're already on AWS, using an AWS service is going to be an order of magnitude easier than getting permission to spin up a new interaction with OpenAI. And having a marketplace on there of existing models and doing what they do really well, which is infrastructure, makes so much sense. They're sticking to their guns. They're creating an open place because OpenAI is winning right now with GPT-4, frankly. but it won't always.
They're winning some. They're winning some race.
Yeah. They won't always. Like, they've got a head start. They haven't won the race. And I think, give it 12 months, we're going to have half a dozen different, almost as good text models. And Amazon has made a really smart move here by saying, whoever you are, come play on our platform. They're not aiming to win on the quality of their model. They're saying this is the place where models run. And I think Microsoft wanted to do that, but they might have tied themselves up too much with OpenAI to now backtrack and bring other models onto Azure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if we think about Amazon as well, right? Like, they've just moved one step up the value chain, which is such a great strategy when there's so many moving parts to this. We know that, and when you're in a world where you're trying to pick winners, they've gone, you know what, we're not going to pick a winner. We're just going to happily sell to everyone. And Google and Microsoft are now in this position as well. Microsoft probably more so from their aggressiveness with OpenAI, but they're both in this position where it's like, if you are out there creating your own independent AI company, which has its own independent model, are you really like, is Microsoft and Google going to be completely open to hosting a competitor to their big investments here? Yeah. And like obviously when you're small, maybe you'll get some Azure credits and it's okay. But what Amazon has just said is like, hey, we're a neutral third party. Come on through.
Yeah. And I think it's a good move. And, that's not to say that Amazon's home-baked Amazon Basics AI is any worse. I mean, by all accounts, these models are really good, but they're not putting so much of a fence around who can play on their platform, and I think that is going to benefit them in the long run, and I'd be surprised if... I mean, Google's doing it to a certain extent. Who was it that they partnered with? Was it Anthropic?
Yeah, this was one thing here which I found funny, which is Anthropic is on AWS. Maybe they're just pointing in some direction that way, or maybe Anthropic's across both platforms. But recently Anthropic took investment from Google in the form of Google Cloud credits to the order of like $300 million or something like that. I think we talked about it back on like episode 32. And it's just, I didn't expect to see Anthropic on Amazon AWS's list, but
yeah, I think for this to really work, it's kind of the openness needs to go both ways. You've got to say you can host your model here, you can host your model anywhere. It doesn't matter. The reason that we're going to win on AWS is because you're already here, your data's already here, and we have really good infrastructure. And cloud is now back to just competing on cloud. Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything that you know so far about these Amazon models or anything that you can comment on?
Only at a really high level. I don't think there's anything too wild here from what I've seen. Yeah. They're just pre-trained models available for people to use in their applications. And to be honest, I think for a lot of use cases, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the way to link this back is that AWS could be the independent host for foundation models that aren't and true foundation models, if we definitely consider that openness characteristic.
Yeah, definitely. Another bit of news I came across, which I think doubles down on this need for openness, is this post from a Substack called The Sequence, which you should check out. There's a link in the show notes. But the title of this edition, I don't know what post, was The Llama Effect, how an accidental leak sparked a series of impressive open source alternatives to ChatGPT. Yeah. So we talked about Alpaca a while ago, and it being sort of a fine-tuned version of Llama, trained very cheap, allowing you to hack and build your own model without needing a data center full of GPUs. Initially, that would have been a pretty tough thing to do, but some people, don't know who they were, put the Llama weights on BitTorrent, and now the whole world has them. And it wasn't intentional from Facebook. You had to apply for access to the weights originally, but because that's happened, this article itself cites 5 different GPT type projects, all doing different things. Some looking at fine-tuned to specific applications, some being small that you can run on, your desktop computer, some of them being really specific around reinforcement learning from human feedback. This stuff is only possible because this was open. If this was just an API, people wouldn't be able to retrain these distilled models. They wouldn't be able to make the weird and wacky, wonderful versions that they want to make. So, yes, it was an accident in this case, but it sets up a pretty clear example in my mind of why I think it's so important that this is an open model, not an open API.
This story as well, there's this thought that's been bubbling in the back of my head for the last couple of weeks is OpenAI's lead as big and wide as it seems to be just from the amount of engagement they've had from users? And this is another little piece of information that the answer is no from a model performance and capability point of view. It just has surprised me how quickly everyone has caught up to pretty similar performance, and also the rate at which people have been able to reduce the load on it as well. Now, obviously, we don't know how accurate things is performed because pick your test in each situation here, and you can make things look better or worse depending on which test you put. But the fact that people are getting pretty equivalent performances for significantly less compute or significantly less training time or significantly less data from open source models to what Microsoft has given $10 billion for, it just says to me that maybe OpenAI's lead in this space isn't as large as you think based off their user engagement.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And this whole look into foundation models this week really got me thinking about, is there an angle for OpenAI to build itself an Apple-like brand in the AI space? And what I mean by that is taking mobile phones as an example, or laptops, pick your poison. If you look at Apple products versus Android, let's say, iPhone versus Android, you can get some really good Android phones. But people think that you are shit if you don't have an iPhone in a lot of cases. Yeah. They've built this luxuriness about their brand that, if you get a text message from somebody and it hasn't got that iMessage blue or whatever, people look at you funny. And I get the feeling, and I don't know what really sparked this, but I couldn't help but feel that OpenAI seems to be trying to create that within the world of AI, in that if you're not running ChatGPT and DALL-E, sure, it's kind of good, but it's inferior. And if they can nail that, they have a real chance of building a moat that is not based on model performance. I think that's really, really difficult.
Yeah, they've gone and done the literal equivalent of iPhone of capture the name in the consumer's mind, right? So, how people call a smartphone an iPhone, even though it's not an iPhone brand.
Yeah.
People do that with GPT. They call it, what do they call it? It's a chat, Auto GPT that was released this week, Chaos GPT. Obviously, GPT is an acronym that means, but obviously everyone only associates that with OpenAI. So they've gone and done that. And the second thing as well is it feels like it's going to be that thing where, I've got a company phone, right? And it's an iPhone and they quote safety at me and something, but really Apple's and I run Microsoft, right? It's that's just stock standard to do in the professional world, and it'll probably be stock standard to run OpenAI's models, but there'll be hackers on the side running other things, and startups and smaller companies, scrappier companies will run other things, and there'll be there'll be cultural preferences like Mac first, PC for developers, etc.
Yeah, and I think, coming back to this Amazon play, I think it's going to come down to developer experience, and both at the sort of startup hacker level developer experience and at the enterprise developer experience. And whoever wins there, I think, is going to win. You might have a model that's not quite as good. I mean, look how many people use Microsoft Teams because it's just there. It's just part of the bundle.
Yeah, it's as having used it now, it's 20% inferior to Slack as well. but it's just there. It's what we use, and it gets the job done. It's okay.
Yeah, and I think if you tried to go on some mission within your company to get everybody to switch to Slack, it would be such an uphill battle for 20% improvement. Same way that if you've been building on Bedrock on AWS and somebody goes, yeah, but the OpenAI models, they're better. Uphill battle. I'm almost certain.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's some nice news/current examples of foundation models and a little bit of broader commentary on that. Let's switch gears and answer the question of this product, which is, are foundation models the future of AI? And I thought we could look at kind of three areas of where foundation models could exist. The kind of first area that I thought of was what I've called I literally practiced this before starting this episode. Anthropomorphous models. So that is replicating some form of human sensory or senses or action. So think computer vision, right? Like we're trying to replicate human eyesight there. There's the generative models, which is obviously everyone knows what generative is now these days. And then I've labeled it the non-anthropomorphous models. Things that we wouldn't really recognize as a human being or how we think. And those would be around the world of like thinking and science, like thinking from a compute point of view, and how actual computation is done as well. So think matrix multiplication and things like that. So those are kind of three areas that I think we could talk about. And obviously if you've got any bonus ones as well to talk about.
No, I think that's a good way to structure it. For those who aren't watching the video, Tom is just battling the light coming in from his window right now.
I don't even know whether my screen is working because it's so bright in here. I think I'm getting sunburned through glass.
Very good. Yeah, look, I think that's a nice way to think about it and where this stuff is going. As we talked before, there's definitely certain tasks that I think AI is going to gobble up pretty quickly, and those are tasks that AI was doing before. Sorry, that foundation models are going to gobble up pretty quickly, and that's segmentation and text generation and parsing text and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think if we think of them as foundational to building products for the real world, they do need to undergo real world tasks. So yeah, I think vision, speech, and then maybe something physical around action as well. We don't talk about robotics that much in this show, but
no. Oh, did you see the Google robots this week? Sort of.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was really cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you're right. Like mimicking these sort of key human real world behaviors is going to be an important part of widespread foundation model adoption.
And I think those will be the first to fall as well because they have the most, as you said, the most applicable use case where it is, hey, we need to be able to identify license plates. Bang, done, computer vision problem. Yep. Great, let's go after that. Hey, we need to be able to converse with our to-do list better, or converse with Microsoft Teams or Cortana or whatever it's now going to be called with Microsoft's better. Like they have use cases which mean they have money, which mean they have people running after them, especially when there's $20 million seed round flying around, as we'll talk about in a second. And so I think those are like the ones that are we're already seeing it, right? And those are already starting to get past the general computer vision space as well, right? And they're starting to, as you said, get broken down into tasks. And I'll bring up where I think we might differ now a little bit on this and I'll pose it as a question rather than like my point of view, but do you think as well we will see foundational models in specific verticals? I know it violates one of your characteristics, but do you think we could end up with a foundation model in segmenting of medical images?
I think as we were tossing around terminology before, I think that's that sort of level 2. We might call them foundation models. I think they're likely to be based on other models that are more broadly trained. So we might take SAM and fine-tune it to the medical application space. I think we're a long way from training just a version of SAM on only medical segmentation problems because it's not going to see the breadth of different cases. So, let's call those level 2 foundation models. They're going to exist for sure, and they're going to be really important. I just wonder if we need a different name for them.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting because I do see it going this way, right? Where it's this step by step. It's a series. It's not this parallel development where we needed the foundational models. Today's foundational models will spur the level 2 models, and eventually those level 2 models, which were trained from the foundational models, will then become the foundational models for the level 3 models, and those foundational models will probably almost not disappear, if you know what I mean, but like it'll be like GPT-3 is to GPT-4. And what GPT-5 is apparently being done at the moment for that, which is GPT-4 is helping train GPT-5. At some point, it will be archived and bookshelved and put up on the shelf and retired. But we wouldn't have got the next model down the chain without it. And at some point, if we if the world blows up, we'd have to go back and recreate them all, right? But like, it's this series, and I see this world where we're going to be. Foundational models will get less and less general and move more and more specific, both within the vertical / industry and also with the task as well. So we'll go from segmenting, and then in 10 years' time, we'll look back and we'll have segmenting for, could be 10 days at the rate we're moving at the moment, but like segmenting for medical, and then segmenting for medical will turn to segmenting for oncology, and then segmenting for oncology will turn into a foundational model that's segmenting for, lymphatic cancers or something like that. Like it'll just keep going down, but we wouldn't have got there without the prior foundational model.
Yeah. Look, I think you're right. We're going to see this sort of pyramid effect of getting smaller data sets, training on top of, bigger, lower down the chain foundational models to get closer and closer to a product. Sam makes for a good demo right now, but if you wanted to use it for something very specific, like counting cows in a field or whatever else, you'd need to build on top of it.
Yeah, I'd feel, and I feel like I would sum it up as I feel like today's fine-tuned level 2 models will become tomorrow's foundational models for the next wave of development.
Yeah. I think part of that needs to be about data set size. We need there's 11 million images here, 1 billion segmentations. I am hopeful that one day we'll have that in medicine as an example, but I think you'd be really hard pressed to get that today.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing, right? Is you will get stopped from being able. The definition from fine-tuned to foundational, obviously it's a grey area and a moving target, but you end up at this world where you cannot progress beyond where you are because you run into a roadblock from a data and a data constraint essentially. And what might be interesting as well is that we might physically hit a roadblock on some industries, such as if we take Bloomberg GPT as example, right? Yep. They had some of the largest data sets in the world, but they were like, yeah, we could probably do with some more data, and they were running out already. So there will be some areas where we hit a natural limit where it's we only have 1 million images of livers.
Well, yeah.
Not that's true.
No, but you're absolutely right. But I think if we bring this back to the thing about people and the way that people get trained to do stuff, when we're young, going through school or even before that. Yeah. Let's take vision for an example. We just get trained to just recognize stuff. We want to recognize the difference between a wall and not a wall, so we don't run into the wall. And then, we get more nuanced as we get older, and, some of us become radiologists, and then we learn how to look at medical images. I think an interesting challenge that we're yet to overcome is how do we make AI models as adaptable as people are? You could probably take a radiologist, train them for a little while in how to look at satellite images to spot cows or something, let them do that for a while, and then put them back behind a radiology screen, and they'd pick that back up. I think still if you did that with a lot of AI models, they would just catastrophically fail on the way out and the way back in.
Yeah, interesting. Let's switch gear to other future foundation models of where do you think, we've talked about replicating humans, right? And there'll be some around there, and then on the generative side as well, we've got image, we've got video, we've got audio to some extent as well, we've got text as well, and the generation of And then there's the multimodal, where it's anything to anything kind of models. What about the things that we can't think, like, what are the, like, red herrings that are just going to come out of some random university? Not red herrings. What are the, like, random things that are going to come out of research labs in universities where it's like, oh, I've been testing what happens if I run an AI that's, like, solely designed for working on particle physics.
Yeah, I think industrial processes, trying to generate that, maybe, novel materials. If we think about polymers and how we synthesize a lot of materials these days, if we can come up with sort of novel ways to run some sort of CNC-like chemistry setup, we could come up with new materials. Similarly, we could synthesize DNA and put it inside cells and, turn us all into zombies probably. But I think that stuff is going to be wildly cool. I guess the more down-to-earth, accessible version of this is like, what if AI just starts making recipes? Like, tell me how to bake the best cake, or suggest some cocktails, and do that sort of stuff. And it is text, but text is just the transmission medium of a sequence of activities that a human might then carry out and see what happens.
Yeah. I think the best example of what you were talking about there with, like, create new materials is, like, the real world example there is AlphaFold, right? Like, that's where it's like we're asking it to think of things that we haven't thought of yet and imagine things. I think there's going to be some really cool stuff on, like, asking, like, how to improve GPU computation for and how to improve how to make AI compute faster. There could be some really interesting things as well around, like, how is the best way to interact with you as an agent from a, like, physical code point of view as well. I wonder whether we'll live to see a, like, fully AI generated language that is the best way to interact with it. That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think, like, the stepping stone to that in my mind is definitely like a programming language or something generated by AI.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway.
No, cool. I mean, on this topic of new and interesting stuff, a couple of deals this week that we found that were foundational model adjacent. It's pretty hard to find specific foundational model deals, but we got 3 here that are probably worth noting. 2 cheeky seed rounds and then 1. Oh, heavens. But let's start with the seed rounds.
We'll start smallest and go biggest. And we're starting smallest at 17 million down for a developer preview product. Love it. So Fixie AI, well, I'm not sure if it's Fixie.ai or Fixie, is a cloud-based platform for building, hosting, and scaling natural language agents that integrate with arbitrary tools, data sources, and APIs. They've raised a $17 million seed round led by Redpoint, and basically you get your data and your API and you connect it to any LLM, like any one you choose, and then boom, you've got your own personal agent working on that data and API. So imagine someone downloaded all of our podcasts, turned it into a transcript, used Fixie, and then bang, done. They have an agent that replicates Tom and Elliot's thinkings on AI. We should do that.
It's pretty cool. I like the idea. I mean, I'm still skeptical about some of these models. I think, like, they're good at interpolation. I'm not yet convinced that they're good at extrapolation, in that, if we told it to talk about a topic that we'd talked about or touched on or something around the periphery, I'm sure it'd do fine. If we asked it to talk about surfing, it would probably just implode, even though both you and I could talk about surfing.
But I also wonder as well, like, how much bias you might have connected to your data set, right? And you might be asking it specific questions which you have a specific opinion on. Yeah. But you've only got 1 or 2 examples of that specific opinion. When's it going to dilute itself and not bring in your opinion and bring in whatever agent LLM that it's hooked up to in the background? Like, when are you going to, if you ask Elliot's opinion on, what's something you don't like? Elliot's opinion on, what's it called? Prompt engineering. you might not have spoken enough about it, and before you know it, it's picked up every thread boy on Twitter's love of prompt engineering and says, Elliot loves prompt engineering.
Prompt engineers get paid $350,000 a year. I agree. I mean, I can see a lot of good uses for this. You know, like you can imagine the hotel concierge being replaced by an agent like this, so that if you don't have a concierge that speaks every language under the sun, you've got somebody there that can help out. I see a lot of cool stuff around that, a lot of local knowledge and personalized experience, or on-site training for industrial applications. It's cool. Yeah. I can see a ton of uses. Don't get me wrong. And I think when there's guardrails up around that, it's like, look, we're using this just to do site inductions for stuff. That's fine. Like, it's never going to go rogue enough that it matters.
I would love this at work. And if anyone wants to build it, I'd love to use it and suggest it for our company of like, hey, what have we done in the past on this piece of work or this topic or something like that? Like, and who did it? That would be, and like, you know, find the document for me. I would love that.
Yeah, definitely. It makes a lot of sense. I imagine you guys collect so much material over the years, and I think it also can help in this case get rid of some bias. If you looked at a generative AI deal 4 years ago, your notes might be like, this is garbage. There is no applications for this. And if you just said, if you have an internal bias of like, we looked at this, it was crap, and missed the shift in the industry. Obviously, this one's slapping everybody in the face, but you can imagine, forgetting why you said no in the first place.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this of like, how am I going to use AI, or when's AI going to take my job in investing? I got some good thoughts on this. We should maybe dig into this and do an episode on when's AI going to take our individual jobs, and like where it's going to help us in the beginning. And I see there's like 4 stages for taking my job, and the 4 stages like helping to actually evaluate investment decisions, provide recommendations, and ultimately remove biases from the presenting team. Because the way we work is someone comes up with someone works on the investment and presents it to the rest of the team. If I present my biases, the team will probably end up accepting my biases unless they can figure out what they are.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I can see both like the interrogative AI helping out there, trying to dig into some stuff, and also the generative application. So there's this idea in software development called mutation testing, when you want to test your code. And what it does is it takes your existing code and like tweaks it in various ways. And if the test that you wrote still pass in all cases, it raises a bit of a red flag. It says like, well, I just changed the multiply signs in your whole code base to divides and nothing broke. I really don't think you have checked how robust your assumptions are here. And you can imagine, taking a deck, an investment deck or an investment memo, and running that through some sort of AI and say, hey, can you generate half a dozen different variants of this that maintain these, key assumptions, key things that don't change, but tweak the language, tweak the visuals, tweak the, founders' backgrounds and things like that, and get the team to review a bunch of those and find out which common threads get through and which ones don't.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and send the and randomly assign every one member in the team the super optimistic and the super pessimistic versions.
Yeah, exactly. And help sort of work out what those threads are that lead to people saying no.
Yeah. I'm just imagining as well this AI where it's like scary boss mode when you're like super interrogates your work, or chilled out boss mode.
Yeah, 100%. Or, I mean, a much more ridiculous one on this same note, but probably more applicable to the general audience, is you could imagine, I don't know what the key dating apps are these days. I'll just say Tinder. This is not my world. But you can imagine Tinder creating 50, 100, 1,000 synthetic profiles when you first sign up, just to work out what you say yes to then try and work out how to serve up other people who are real for you to then say yes to.
Yeah. Isn't this like a Black Mirror episode?
I don't know, probably. Everything's a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, there's one where it's like,
Simpsons.
you sign up, the dating apps just turn into there's a 99.9% chance this is your love of your life.
Oh. I feel like there's a whole show about that.
Isn't it's a Black Mirror episode? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, maybe.
I haven't watched it, but
yeah. Anyway, plenty of applications like that, which I don't think is where this.
Elliot's happily married, but he's happy to be a tester. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know if that's where Fixie.ai is going.
Yeah, well, we took a detour there.
We did. All right, let's pull us back. Chroma, $18 million seed round. Tell me more.
Yep, they just picked Fixie, and they beat him by $1 million. They're led by Quiet Capital. They added Naval Ravikant, and some of the founders are Hugging Face and Jasper to the board. So good to see Jasper's already taking some secondary money off the table there. Seems to still be in development, which seems to be the theme of $18 million seed rounds at the moment. But anyway. So Chroma is the AI native open source embeddings database. Using embeddings, Chroma lets developers add state memory to the AI enabled applications. And this is where I throw over to Elliot to explain that.
This feels like a bit of marketing mumbo jumbo in amongst some AI terms in my mind. So look, embeddings, we've talked about these before. You can take an image, you can generate an embedding. You can take text, generate an embedding. And it's sort of a underneath the hood way of representing data within an AI model. If there's an open source embeddings database, you may be able to write these embeddings, read them back, and have your AI application, I guess, query that database as it goes. So you might embed all of the investment memos that have ever come through the company in this database as a pre-ingested format. And then when a new investment memo comes through, you query the database for all the embeddings and do your magic AI on top of them there. It's an infrastructure play. Sounds like a useful tool. Potentially $20 million and no product. I don't know. Best of luck to him.
I feel like there's so much moving parts in this place at the moment, in this space at the moment, where it's like this could end up being like that weird niche infrastructure play that data/infrastructure play that no one really understood, but is suddenly worth $10 billion in 5 years' time, or OpenAI could do one push and the business model's done.
Yeah, and I'd want to know a lot more about the tech here and why. Yeah, I mean, a lot of embeddings are just like sequences of numbers at the end of the day, and you can throw them in as text or some other binary format. We have databases that are very good at storing fuck tons of data. It's not like Facebook doesn't use a database for the million posts and images on there. I'd want to know why this is so different.
Okay, and the final one, which is probably the most related to foundation models, is Anthropic plans to raise $5 billion to take on OpenAI. $5 billion over the next few years. It's like a 4-year plan, and they want to train the largest model ever off it. Someone leaked their pitch deck for their Series C. Had a New Zealand accent there for a second. Their pitch deck for their Series C, and it kind of details a bunch of things. There wasn't too much of value. There wasn't too much that I could gain from it, but I'm going to try and find that pitch deck.
Juicy goss.
Basically, the price of a foundation model is $5 billion. If you want to buy one,
$5 billion is such a lot of money.
I would just love to see what they wanted to raise if OpenAI didn't exist, and hadn't raised huge amounts. Like, are they? How much are they scaled by? Like, well, OpenAI has raised this amount. We need to be this cashed up to be able to compete.
Yeah. That's crazy. Like, just to get a 1x return on revenue from that, like free cash flow, is going to take a really long time, I imagine. $5 billion. At 1 cent an API call, that's a whole lot of API calls that you're going to make. I mean, look, I'm all for big, ambitious visions. I love it. But in the market today, I can't help but think that a lot of these 2 years ago would have had a decimal point shifted. Nobody was raising $20 million for something database AI before it became the new hotness.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, look, again, that's the way of the world. Like these trends come and go. Some of them are more vaporware than others, Web3 that just disappeared overnight. I think AI's got
Web what?
yeah, exactly. I think AI's got more legs. You and I have been doing stuff in AI for 6-7 years.
Yeah.
So it's less, I don't know, less hype in general. But I think definitely there is a bit of hype in the market, overpricing a lot of these rounds.
Well, mate, shall we call it there? We've done a lot today.
We have
3 papers, but it does say I did not read these, and I didn't even see them to write. I did not read these, so better not release them. Maybe we'll talk about them next week. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed the new consolidated format, dear listener, and I think it made our job a little easier and a little bit more structured. So we'll be sticking to it at least for the next little while. But if you made it this far, thank you for sticking around. Thanks for listening. And let's leave it there. We will see you roughly same time next week, assuming we remember to record. Thanks again, friends. Do all the good stuff. And hit us up on Discord. That's the best place to come talk to us. Drop some links. Join our growing community of AI enthusiasts. And until next week, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode. If you're liking this content, make sure you subscribe and like so we keep on going. And if you have any questions, make sure you hit us up on Twitter, join our Discord, or leave them in the comments below. Thanks again.